take a moment to prepare our bodies and prepare our minds. So you can just let yourself sit up tall. Let your hands rest on your knees or thighs. If you'd like, you can close your eyes or leave them open. And just take an inhale and lengthen through your spine. And then exhale, relax, and settle into your body. And so inhale and adopt a posture that makes you feel confident, that makes you feel proud. And then exhale and relax into that feeling. Sitting up tall with your head high. As the body softens and relaxes. And then if your eyes are closed, you can slowly open them, coming back into the room. So I have a question for you tonight. Is awareness in the body, or is the body in awareness? This is a question that I've thought about for a long time. And when I was in India about a year and a half ago, staying at this ashram in Rishikesh. And the teacher there was telling us a story about how in the Vedanta tradition, they would kind of send a disciple into the Ganges, into the river with a bottle. And they would say, all right, put the bottle into the river, and then ask yourself this question. Is the river in the bottle? Or is the bottle in the river? And you have to stay there until you were able to have an answer to that question. And I feel like for me, the answer to that question has really been a process. It's more been a series of insights that have been kind of very pronounced at specific times. But then, very subtly, the deepening and the understanding of those insights have been playing out. And so it wasn't something that, had one experience and then was able to sustain that experience. But sort of a series of experiences and then continuing to assimilate and mature what those experiences really meant have helped me to understand that question. And so, it's often said sometimes in this practice and in this path that we are not our bodies. We are not solely our bodies, that we have bodies, and we should respect and appreciate our bodies. But we're also something more than our bodies. And this is always something that I've wondered about. It seems, so obvious. It's, our bodies is the center of our experience. It's, what we typically identify with the most when someone, calls your name and points at you. And they say, "Hey, Anna." And they're pointing at you. What are they pointing at? What is Anna? Pointing at a body over there that we identify with that person. And I was very curious to see from my own experience if I was actually something more than my body. And I think the first time that I had a direct experience of this was at a 10-day Vipassana retreat in Shelburne, Massachusetts. And it was kind of the Goenka style of Vipassana, where they do a lot of scanning and paying attention to sensations in the body and noticing the flow of the subtle sensations in the body. And I remember being on that retreat, and they kind of really build up this whole technique and start you off really slowly, and then about on the 7th day it culminates in them really describing the full technique and leading you through this really slow body scan and paying attention to all the different sensations in your body. And saying that you might notice, that your body is filled with subtle sensations, and that you might get to a stage where your entire body just dissolves into subtle sensations. And I remember just being completely blown away that as they were describing that experience, that I was having that experience. And my entire body just dissolved into energy. And there wasn't any feeling of the boundaries of my body anymore. It seemed like there was just this flow of energy. And it was incredibly exhilarating and incredibly exciting. But unfortunately, at least at that time, my grasping, intellectual, needing to understand mind immediately latched onto that experience and wanted to understand it and put it into conceptual frameworks and make it happen again, and I got really excited about it. And then I proceeded for the rest of the retreat to just totally be disappointed that I couldn't make that happen again, and I was craving and clinging to that experience, and really brought a lot of trouble and anxiety for a couple of days, until eventually I was able to relax with that a little bit more, and come to maybe a similar state, but nothing like that first time. It just was an experience that totally blew me away. And for the first time, I could actually believe that our bodies were made up of energy, and that this idea about what I think my body is as this solid thing that is me was just totally shattered. From that point, I could never really believe that anymore, even though most of the time it still feels that way. But that experience was the first time that I was really able to see something more, to actually have an experience that gave me some confidence that there was something more than just this solid experience of the body. And then as time went on, I continued to practice. And within this practice of basic mindfulness, the techniques of rest and flow have been really useful to understand that experience and to really get my body into a very deeply relaxed state and to feel the flow of energy and to feel that the boundary of my body, or the actual feeling of the sensations at the boundary of my body, was pretty much just an idea. That really that there can be an experience of feeling the entire space around you. And that this distinction between inside and outside just seemed pretty arbitrary. And so fast forward, a couple years, actually, from when I finally decided to quit my job and really dedicate myself to this practice, and I traveled to Thailand to do a 2-month retreat with Alan Wallace. And the retreat was mostly focused on a shamatha practice, which means a calm abiding or a restful tranquility of trying to have single-pointed concentration on some sort of object that results in a clear and tranquil mind. And there's a certain practice called awareness of awareness, where you simply just be aware of the fact that you're aware. And it's very similar to do nothing, in that you're not intentionally controlling anything or letting things come and go, but you're just paying attention to the quality of awareness of the space of your experience. And I remember there was a little section where we all were staying, and it was in Thailand, and it was beautiful, and it was all outside, and there were these overhangs around the resident quarters where we were all staying, and it formed this square. It was a circle. And so one day during some of our unstructured time, I was just walking around in a circle, walking around in a loop, and trying to maintain this awareness of awareness, just being aware of space, just really paying attention to my entire visual field, to feeling the space around me, and to just walk straight ahead and to keep walking nonstop and just really feel this space. And then eventually something really strange happened where it felt as if awareness itself was stable, and that wherever I was in space was actually standing completely still, and that the entire world was moving around that awareness. It kind of felt like, if you've ever played one of those, is it first person? Like one of those first person shooter games on like the computer or, Xbox or PlayStation or whatever. Actually, I feel really old right now by saying, oh yeah, whatever the new gaming system that's out now. I'm not even really sure. I haven't really paid attention to that in a long time. But this experience of, you're kind of this character and the screen is stable, but you're sort of walking around as this character and it looks like, the screen and the experience is just going by you. But, the screen is stable and you're stable. So you feel that you're kind of standing still, but then this picture of the world around you is just moving. And that's what it was like, and it was just really strange to have this experience of being space and not feeling like my body was moving through space, but that I was space and that everything was moving around me. And then later on, I was in another retreat in Dharamsala, which is the place where the Dalai Lama has his temple, and there's a retreat center on the top of a mountain that's really beautiful. And in a similar way, I was kind of doing this technique and walking around in a circle. In a lot of Tibetan traditions, they like to circumambulate and walk around things. Not really sure why, it's kind of interesting. But in the same way, I was just really determined, I was really focused, just paying attention to space, and I was walking around in a circle. And then even at that time, there was a lot of flow of thoughts going on in my mind. A lot of thoughts, a lot of different sensations. And then again, another time, there was an experience where, different than the first time, where it seemed like there was a stable sense of awareness and the world moving around it. But instead this time, it was like I was everywhere. That my awareness was everywhere, filling space. And that somehow my body was still moving. I was still walking, and thoughts were still flowing through my mind. And it was very clear that neither of those things were me at all. And yet they were still happening. My body was, or a body, was still moving. But my awareness was just filling space. And so I would say that these experiences were insights, but they weren't lasting insights. They were very much peak experiences. An experience of clarity where it gave me a lot of confidence, and there was a sense of joy, and there was a sense of freedom and fulfillment in those experiences. But then they would disappear. And then the regular world of suffering and anxiety and confusion and all that stuff would still be there. But interestingly enough, as I continue to do this practice, and a lot of my practice now, in my own personal sitting practice, is really connecting with this space and actually seeing and feeling the space around me. And more as I sit, I'm becoming familiar with the fact that I am not limited to my body, that who or what I am, that this awareness that kind of perceives the space around me is more what I identify with than feeling like my awareness is trapped somehow inside this body. That my awareness is larger than that, and that my body just happens to also be in that awareness. You know, just like the images of everyone else's body that I can see, and the space around me that I can feel. And the more and more I actually become familiar with this experience through my seated practice, the more and more it's easier for me to maintain a subtle connection with that as I move around the world. That I really do feel when I am present and when I am engaged with my sensory experience, that there's just space and that there's experiences moving through that space. And when I'm able to really stay connected to that, life is just really more enjoyable. There's a sense of fulfillment, there's a sense of connection. And then there are clearly times where I'm not in that space. And it's very clear to me that when I'm not connected to that, worrying about things and getting caught up in things and I don't know, I wouldn't say that it's suffering and that I feel miserable, but there's definitely not a sense of joy and excitement about just being alive and being in the moment. You know, there's a subtle sense of discontentment and not satisfied and wanting things to change and be different. But as soon as I can remember, you know, that experience and connect with that state, life just becomes a lot easier. And it's really nice to not have to be limited to such a confined space. I remember one teacher said that, you know, sometimes if we feel like who we are is just limited to this body and to this personal identity, it can be sort of like you have a teacup. And then if you drop a pebble in that teacup, it creates a huge splash. And so if something comes up in your life, you know, it's this big problem, a lot of turmoil, a lot of difficulty can arise. But if you're actually able to expand the idea of who and what you are, to, you know, cover all beings, to cover all things, to cover all space, it's like being a great ocean. And if you drop that same pebble into that ocean, it hardly creates a splash. It creates a little ripple, and then it's gone, and you don't even notice it compared to the vastness of that ocean. And that's definitely what it feels like when I can kind of contact that space. And so I spent a lot of time really exploring this experience. And a lot of people can talk about this and try to explain it in different ways, but I tend to be a very technically, scientifically oriented person. And at least in my own experience, and I can't say that this will be true for everyone, but I feel like in order to contact this experience, there has been a very clear sequence of things that need to happen. And that when those sequence of things can happen, it's really easy, at least for me, to drop into that space. And so for our practice tonight, I'm going to share that with you. And we'll see how it goes. And the important thing to remember is that, just like for me, this has been a progression over time, where I've assimilated and adopted this experience, and that I do believe that there is a sequence of things that sort of need to happen slowly over time that might lead to such an experience. And so the beginning ones are really easy to do, and I'm confident that everyone here can do them. And then when I get towards the end, if you're not experiencing this, don't worry about it. But just kind of feel comfortable where you can actually maintain the practice in the progression along the way. And that if you feel like the next step is just not available for you, then forget about what I'm saying and just stay where you are. And just see if you can let that experience develop a little bit more until maybe at some point the next step will kind of arise a little bit more spontaneously. So let's take a moment to find a proper posture. And so before we start, I'll just say that, so in my experience, the very first step to be able to try to contact the taste of this awareness is to keep your body completely still. And that if your body is moving around, it's very difficult to become aware of the more subtle things that are happening. So make sure you make yourself comfortable. You shouldn't, if you can do something about it, you shouldn't be in pain. So make sure you find a position where you can stay comfortable and you can stay still. And that might look different for different people, so you know your own body. Find a posture where you can stay alert, but also relaxed and still. So I would suggest closing your eyes. I think it's possible to do this with your eyes open, but at least in my experience, it's been much easier with the eyes closed. And take a moment to just feel your body. Bring your awareness into your body. And see if you can let your breath be natural and relaxed. Just flowing through the internal space of the body. And as best you can, keep your body still. And when the body is still, and the awareness is in the body, you might start to notice things that you've never noticed before. Subtle sensations. And so see if you can zoom your awareness out and pay attention to your entire body. You might be able to feel your entire body. Or there might be parts of the body that you feel and parts of the body that you don't feel. But either way, you can still feel the fact that you don't feel certain parts of your body. So in that way, allow yourself to feel your entire body. Being fully aware of the parts that you feel and the parts that you don't feel. And see if you can imagine that your body is hollow. That inside this shell, the skin, is just empty space. See if you can feel that empty space. Notice how the natural flow of breath moves through that empty space. And as it does that, it ripples out and actually affects that space. So if you can become aware of the empty empty space inside the body. And just feel whatever you feel. Maybe it's restful, maybe it's flowing, maybe it feels static and stable. Maybe you don't feel parts at all. Anyway, just know what you feel inside that space of the body. And then bring your attention to the space inside this room. So now pay attention to the space outside of your body. And notice that even that is something that you can feel. You can feel the space around you. And notice if there are any boundaries to that space. How far does that space go? See if you can expand your awareness as far as you can imagine. As you do so, do you ever find a boundary? Do you find an end point? And see if you can feel that space, just like you can feel your body. Keeping your body still and the breath natural. Relax into this awareness of space. And now bringing your awareness to the boundary between this inner space and this outer space. To the place where your physical body ends and the outside world begins. And ask yourself, can you really find this boundary? Maybe be aware, is this boundary simply a mental image? A picture in your mind of where your body is in space? And if that mental image is there, then allow it to be there. But pay attention to if you can feel this boundary. Can you actually feel the boundary between your body and the space around you? If you can feel it, is it something that's stable? Or is there a subtle pulse to it? Does it expand and contract? Does it change with time? And so if you don't find this boundary, see if you can just let your awareness expand into space and just feel that entire space with no distinction between inside and outside. And if you do feel this boundary, just keep your attention on that boundary. Really investigate it. And really ask yourself, is that boundary actually there? So continuing to keep your body still, the breath natural and calm. Your awareness expanding into space, feeling that space. Allow yourself to slowly open your eyes. And with your head held high, take a look at the entire space in front and around you. Let your eyes be wide open. And see that space. Feel that space. And see if you can simply be aware of sensory experience coming and going within space. You don't need to identify with only this body. But every experience in the space around you is arising in awareness. And so what makes any of those experiences fundamentally different from the feeling of your own body? And just one more experience arising in space. See if you can be every experience, filling the space around you.